This is Todd Foley, creator of Day Trippers and Other Borders. You're listening to Legends of Tabletop.
Good evening, everybody, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. This is the Legends of Tabletop podcast. We're happy to have Todd back on again. Todd was back, I think he was like episode 13 originally when we talked about Day Trippers. So welcome back, Todd.
Thank you. It was quite over a year ago, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. It's been a little while. So how you been doing?
It's good to be back, and I've been doing pretty good. 2016 is over.
Yeah. Thank God for that, right?
You know, we made it through that, and we're rocking into 2017 now. Actually, I've just started 6 new Patreons. That was my 2017 bold business maneuver.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I had one Patreon before, but the difficulty there was I don't find that Patreon is a very sociable place. You know, it's not a lot of talk going on, not a lot of feedback going on. And I had sort of lumped everything I was doing together into one banner. As If Productions, support As If Productions. Well, support me and all the creative shit that I do.
Right.
But that didn't really give people a chance to, let's say, vote with their dollar for whatever their own particular favorite game or line or product is. And so that's what I've done is I've just broken them all out so that if you want to support Day Trippers, you can, your dollar will go to Day Trippers.
Sure. That makes sense. You do have a ton of different things going on over there on the webpage, so I'm not too surprised with so many different Patreons, I guess.
I'm trying to be democratic.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Let people vote with their dollars.
Exactly.
All right. So I guess I don't know if that takes the place of our Something Cool, but we have this segment on the front called Something Cool. Do you have any other cool things going on?
Well, I think you can actually find them all from there. So, if you go to asitproductions.com, right at the top, you'll see the link to patreon.com/asif. And all the other Patreons are linked from there.
Nice.
So if you'd like to support the weird work that I do, and I deliberately pursue weird stuff. I mean, Day Trippers, it's not enough for me to do science fiction. I have to do surreal science fiction, right? And as you'll find out tonight, in Other Borders, it's not enough for me to do gangland noir modern day. No, I got to throw magic in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of weird stuff that I like to do, and I could always use more support.
Cool. And links for all that stuff will be in the show notes, so you guys can all check that out on the webpage. So if you're watching this video on YouTube, obviously we don't have any video going tonight. My laptop took a shit, so that is fantastic. That's not cool. Vince caught the holiday bug that crunchy. The only time you get it is this time of the year when you're visiting relatives and all that. So he's a little bit under the weather. So flying solo with Todd tonight, and I hope you bear with us through that. Cool thing I have going on is I've received my Dice of Crowns game from Kickstarter from Thing 12 Games. They're out in the wild now. So if you've backed that or read our review way back when, you can expect to see those soon. It looks fantastic, so kudos to those guys. But that's not why you're here. You're here to listen to us talk to Todd or listen to me talk to Todd. So you've got a new game out called Other Borders. You want to give us a little bit of background on this?
Well, Other Borders is, first off, it's a DramaSystem game. And as you know, DramaSystem, you might be familiar with Hill Folk or with Melandros. These are games based on DramaSystem, which is by Robin Laws. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, let's say, I'm going to go ahead and use the N word, narrativist. It's a very narrativist kind of approach to a role-playing tabletop setting that's truly brilliant at bringing out what you might consider ensemble drama, very, very genre synth, right? So it's good for doing soap opera type stuff, television drama type stuff, movies with a lot of dialogue and emotion, the whole system is based on milking the relationships between the characters out in the most dramatic ways possible. And so it seemed like a really interesting system to use when I was first approached by Tom McGranery, who wrote Melandros, to do an expansion for his Kickstarter. This was just sort of an area I wanted to go. And I thought about DramaSystem a little bit, and Tom had given me carte blanche to do whatever I wanted to do. And so brainstorming a little bit, thinking about DramaSystem and what I would like to do with it, what sort of genre, what sort of setting would I use to milk that DramaSystem for all it was worth. And I started thinking about telenovelas. You've got it's your Mexican soap opera is basically right. What it is. But they're really grandiose and over the top, and the plots always twist and turn, and there's a lot of gut-wrenching emotional scenes, overwrought melodrama. And I like that, and I wanted to go in that direction, but I also wanted to do one other thing I hadn't seen anyone else do. I mean, maybe, people in the comments can correct me if I'm wrong, but so far, no one's ever corrected this statement. I don't think anyone else has ever done magic inside DramaSystem, a magic system for DramaSystem. And so that was a challenge I just kind of wanted to do for myself. The other part, the magical realism part, because ultimately, I guess you could say Other Borders is a crime telenovela set in a southwestern modern town, fused together with the magical realism from which I drew from. Really, there's a broad history of what they call magical realist literature, usually associated with Latin America, started in Mexico and in Latin America. Now it's a genre of its own. The idea of magical realism is a work in which the magic stuff is presented with every bit as much realism as the quote-unquote real stuff. But the two realities, although they overlap, sort of like in the real world, never quite fully explain each other. You just have to sort of take the magic for what it is. It happened. It happened. Something inexplicable just happened. And that's a part of the real world. So I wanted to fuse those two things together. I drew a lot of my research from the works of Carlos Castaneda, wrote a series of books about his apprenticeship with a maybe real but probably not real Yaqui Indian shaman named Don Juan Matus back in the 70s, and the tremendously bizarre things that happened, the drug trips that he went on, assuming the form of other animals or voyaging into the other world, coming back with actual knowledge, tactical, strategic knowledge that could be used in the battle against his enemies. I wanted to milk those two things for all they were worth and tie them together. And so this is what I came up with. You've got a small town that's recently been sort of taken over by the Mexican cartels who are running drugs up into the United States. You've got a very porous border to the south, where there's traffic going back and forth all the time. This is true, although the rates of immigration, illegal immigration over the border have decreased recently. What has increased is the amount of arms and money going south over that border. I mean, the situation is not as simple as you would hear on the nightly news, right?
Right.
And so you've got a lot of opportunity for drama and plot between the cartels, Border Patrol, the cops who are trying to stop the drug flow. You've actually got intelligence agents working double undercover who are moving drugs into the country. On top of that, you've got this small town with its typical small town problems. There's gang violence, there's drug-related crime. But there's also the ancient powers of magic, which are passed down from mentor to apprentice through the generations. They're going back hundreds of years, and that magic is real. So there's your setting. Now, what are you going to get out of that? It depends on who your players are. I mean, if you feel like running a crime drama, good guys versus bad guys, or you want to run a very communal sort of drama where the town has to rise up, and maybe there's a community activist organization, or maybe there's some priest who begins getting the people motivated to fight against the drug dealers. Or maybe it's about an old versus new, right? You've got a person who lives in the new world is encountering this ancient magic and finding out for the first time it's real. It really depends on who you've got at the table and what sort of drama you're going for, right? Because in order for a drama system game to be useful for more than one go, more than one campaign, you have to build a setting that's got lots of factions and lots of possible ways that that relationship map could be drawn.
Mm-hmm. And you provide a pretty good framework there. I mean, you've got the cartels, you've got the gangs, you've got, you know, not ATF, but the Border Patrol. You have all these different aspects already set up, and you know, you have the different types of magic. So there's a lot of different things that you can draw on depending on what kind of story that you do want to tell. I mean, everybody could be a gang member, or some gang members, cartel members. You could have, you know, players on both sides where, you know, some of them are cartel members, some of them are Border Patrol. You just to really get at that crux of, like you said, the drama in that story.
Absolutely. In my playtest campaign, what began as a sort of a straightforward cops versus the cartel, sort of almost like a tactical campaign, is starting to take a weird turn now, because the townspeople who are interested in stopping the flow of drugs to their town have just recruited a mestizo magician he's a shaman who lives off at the reservation at the edge of town. And so now the magic is starting to come into play. And it's interesting when you start out with something sort of realistic and you do that for 3 sessions, and then somebody brings the magic in and the whole thing takes this weird spin.
Yep. Yeah, and it just changes rules. Like you said, it's just, you know, it's daily life, but there's this other aspect that, you know, people either choose to ignore or, you know, haven't encountered, and other people who are just completely enmeshed in that part of the world.
Yeah, you can have a true reality clash, right? And again, that's part of what, I mean, if it's done well, you know, magical realist literature sets up this sort of cognitive dissonance in your head, where it's like part of you goes, wow, that was poetic and beautiful and it totally happened and I buy it. And the other part of you is going, wait a minute, if he was there, then how could he also be there at the same time? Wait a minute, that doesn't compute. And at the same time, you have to hold these two realities in your head. That's part of the flavor of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. The first thing when I first started going through the rules, what struck me as it's similar to a certain extent of the urban fantasy that I enjoy, most specifically Charles DeLint. I don't know if you're familiar with his works at all.
I'm not.
So he's a Canadian author. He's been around for quite some time. I have probably half of a bookshelf full of his books, and it's the same sort of thing. He does some of the novels are set, you know, American Southwest, but they're kind of all over. He has his own little town of Newford in Canada, and it's the same sort of thing. It's like, you know, you're going to work every day, and you know, you're just kind of going about your business, and then, you know, this thing happens and it draws the characters into this other world, you know, side by side, sometimes like completely like, okay, I'm in fairyland now or whatever. And it struck me as very similar in substance to that. And it really kind of grabbed my attention when I, you know, first started going through the book, through the rules.
Yeah, I really want to bring that out. And most of it, and you could, in fact, play your entire campaign without touching the magic rules at all if you wanted to. Do a very straightforward, modern-day Southwest noir kind of a thing.
Sure.
But when the magic comes in, it gives it this interesting flavor. And the kind of magic, I mean, this is not your typical Vancian magic, right? I don't even know how that would work in a drama system game, because everything here is a narrative move, right? When it's your scene, you are, let me back up just a little bit, because this isn't straight drama system. There's something really brilliant that Tom McGreenery did when he created Melandros. 2 things. First, he stripped down the mechanics of drama system. Drama system is actually a little bit more complex than what's presented here. It uses not only tokens, but tokens of different colors with different meanings depending on the context, and also a deck of cards. And Tom took out most of that, leaving the tokens only for the single purpose of drama tokens. When you have a drama token, it's worth a chance to pull something off in a scene that you otherwise might not have been able to pull off. And if the other players want to see you do it, they can even chip in additional drama tokens from their stash to help you pull it off. So it's a way of sort of seizing control of the narrative on a meta level, right? And so he retained that, but he got rid of most of the other mechanics because they're kind of clunky, and they brought a lot of physicality, which sort of takes away from the immersion and the mood, the emotion, the drama that you really want to stay with. And instead, he brought in a system that I'm sure your listeners are familiar with. It's a variant of Vincent Baker's Powered by the Apocalypse system. So you've got that 3 degrees of success, right? You've got your full success, your partial success, and your you're in trouble kind of result. And because so many people are already familiar with the Powered by the Apocalypse system, although this is slightly different, he uses only 1 die, but the mechanics are basically the same. When you are doing something magical, the rules, and again, consider that Powered by the Apocalypse moves, they're always stated in terms of growing out of the fiction. Like when you do this, and then these narrative results point back into the fiction and force something to happen. Right? So rather than a simple, did you succeed or did you not? Did the fireball explode in his face or did it not? It becomes more of a, what trippy, meaningful, and dramatic thing happens? But then also there's a chance of the partial success where the trippy thing happens, but it's not all good for you. When writing for DramaSystem, you need to create something that's always going to point back into the fiction, because the next person who's seen it is probably going to need to respond to that, and you want to give them something really dramatic or meaningful to respond to. So the magic has no 2 spells are the same quality to it. You know what I'm saying? Like even the same spell cast by a different person could have a completely different effect on the game. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that would, sort of speak to the intention of the caster and, their perception of the world and how the character's background is shaped and things like that.
Absolutely. All the magic is really kind of subjective, and it leaves it in the hands of the player who's doing it. Which if you played Apocalypse World, it's it's a little bit like the Psychic Maelstrom, right? When a player enters the Psychic Maelstrom, the GM is supposed to just look at them and say, well, what is it like for you?
Right.
You tell me how it works.
Yep, that's very cool. The other thing it reminds me of is with the degrees of success is the Edge of the Empire. The new Edge of the Empire Star Wars game, where they have the fantasy flights. So hey, we're going to make special dice, but you can fail and get advantage, or you can succeed and have threat. So it does kind of run that gamut. It's not just yes I hit. It's yes I hit, but I trip, or this crate falls down, or here comes the guy's reinforcements, or whatever it is.
Yeah, and whoever's at the table at that time, whoever's basically either whoever's seen it is, or if they're accepting the ideas from someone else at the table, that's up to them too. But basically, the scene caller has got narrative control at that moment. In the metagame, because a narrativist game always has a meta level to it. Right? So in the meta level, you become the author as well as the character at that moment. And the game sort of pushes you to go for the most dramatic thing that could possibly happen. But as far as how that happens, it's totally up to you.
Right. And this type of game is not for every player. People who are geared more towards traditional gaming, those types of games, D&D specifically, focuses more on, what they would term in DramaSystem a procedural scene. I hit it with my sword, I roll my dice, do I succeed or not? Where, storytelling games and DramaSystem, focuses more on the dramatic scenes, those, interpersonal relationships and all those different things. So if it's something that you're looking to get into, you kind of have to judge your players, and GMs know what their players like. So if you think that your players would be into that sort of thing, like if you enjoy playing Fiasco, this would be a good game for you.
Yeah, I think that, well, thanks to the mechanics is sort of flavored by the apocalypse, or if you've played a PBTA game and you liked it, there's a good chance you'll like this. It's sort of like you've already stepped into the realm where the players get a little more narrative control, right? So this is like a second step. This is not the gateway drug, but the second gateway drug. But yeah, I mean, the genre is ensemble, right? If you think of TV series like Weeds, where there's multiple POV characters, they all have their own storyline going on, but they interweave with each other in complex ways, and there's always a double cross, a betrayal. Somebody turns out to be sleeping with somebody else who you thought they were enemies. There's these dramatic twists and turns, and every character has their own through line, but they're interwoven in emotional ways. So it's an ensemble piece, and it's really an ensemble game. I think you're onto something there. If you've got the kind of players who really appreciate the role play part of role playing, that is that I am my character, and I totally know exactly what clothes I wear and what I look like, and here's how I talk, and this is the effect I have on the story around me, then this kind of approach is going to feel natural to you. Right. And if you're more of a gamist or a simulationist player, this may feel a little bit weird. Yeah.
And I think that's cool to a certain extent, because then it sort of takes you out of your comfort zone, and it gives you a different perspective and a new kind of way. So, if you come to something like this and you're like, I don't know, it makes me uncomfortable, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And,
yeah, that's true. There's no rule that said value always comes with pleasure.
Mm-hmm. And then you can, so even if you played one session, you're like, you know what, this is too weird for me. But you can maybe take that back to your D&D game or your Shadowrun game, and it just, gives you a little bit of a touchstone when it comes to those, what you'd consider almost an interstitial scene then, in a D&D game, your downtime, your whatever, where you can, kind of dig into your character a little bit then.
Yeah, that's a good point. These scenes do happen even in the most traditionalist of games. There was, in my long-running AD&D campaign from way back in the 80s, some of the most memorable moments, the dice never hit the table. Mm-hmm. So even traditionalist players know what I'm talking about. It's just that the ratio is reversed, and that's actually where most of the story comes from, and the dice only hit the table once in a while.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Another thing that I've noticed, and again, people in the comments are free to argue with me on this, but I think it can almost be accepted as a truism that the people who tend to like or be good at your more narrativist kind of games often have GM experience themselves. Because they're more accustomed to being responsible for the meta level and for thinking in terms of more than one character. Like, I'm not just in this for me, I'm in this for what's going to create the most interesting, resounding table as like a gestalt across all the heads around the table.
Right. Well, and they're used to wearing all those different hats and really, kind of generating story, or at least, throwing threads out to the players and say, hey, here you go. Where are we going to go from here?
Yeah. In fact, maybe this is a weird analogy I just thought of. I'm not sure if it works, but I'm going to throw it out there. It's like a GM'd game where everybody is the GM and they're all playing a GM'd NPC all at the same time. That's what it is.
Very meta.
Yeah.
So originally you were saying this was an expansion for Melandros, which I guess it's not necessarily the same setting. This is like Melandros is early 1900s, where this is sort of like modern day. When you were looking at it, most people play RPGs. they're playing because they want to get away, they want to disconnect, or kind of to connect to their friends, but sort of disconnect from the outside world. Going through this, it almost reads as like a current U.S. history, sort of going through, and obviously some of the stuff is made up, but the drug traffic and guns coming in and crime and gangs and all these things. Was there any trepidation at all of taking something so real and kind of putting it out for people to play? I mean, obviously there's magic, but that base reality is very cutting, especially for people out here in the Southwest.
Yeah. You know what? No, because I did a lot of research, and my intention is to present, these are the facts of reality as it is. My reasoning behind that was I knew I wanted there to be cartels and gangs in this game, right? But all I knew about cartels and gangs came from movies like Colors, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, or again, the TV series Weeds. This was all filtered by this media lens. And I could have just stuck with the media lens, but then I'm thinking as a player, I'm going, well, as a player, let's say I want to be a dude in the cartel. But I have to make all this up? Like, don't cartels have real names for this? I mean, wouldn't I know how cartels work at least a little bit? Wouldn't I know how gangs work at least a little bit? And I mean, I want the players to have a lot of narrative control, and I want them to, get as colorful as possible with the characters and the relationships and the drama and the magic. But there are real world facts about how cartels work and what drugs are worth and how Border Patrol does its job. And those are all real things. And I didn't want to force people to have to research that or pull up Wikipedia at the game table or know it themselves. So I put that in there, and I just try to remain true to whatever side I'm talking about. I try to remain true to a very simple, stripped down version of what they're all about. I mean, where I live in Las Vegas. I live in East Las Vegas, specifically. I live in a Mexican neighborhood. El Dia de Muerte is a bigger holiday than Halloween is here in my neighborhood. I speak a lot of Spanish. I don't want to say an aficionado because that sounds really snobby, but I've been a longtime fan of writers like Carlos Castaneda and the literary genre of magical realism as a whole, which again draws from its Latin American roots quite a bit. And so on both a literary level and on a realist level, I just wanted to be true to the material. I'll tell you where I did feel trepidation, though. I felt that if I wasn't true enough to the material, I would be attacked as a cultural appropriationist. That was actually my biggest concern, and I hope that I've allayed that in the content.
Sure. As someone who's new to the Southwest, like I said, reading through it was like reading through could be the newspaper, like a current event section. So I, as far as being about kind of what happens, because I'm down here in southern Arizona. I'm not that far from the border at all. It was like, wow, this is like the real deal.
Yeah, I was interviewed by Bree Sheldon, and she asked, I forget the exact wording of the question, but she basically said, like you did you have any trepidation about raising so fraught a topic? And at the time she was asking us, I think it was just shortly before the elections, and you got Donald Trump talking about his wall and all. And that wasn't in my mind at all, because I wrote the game like over the course of the last year, right? And I wasn't thinking about Donald Trump or his wall or anything like that. And I didn't realize until after the interview was published that was what she meant.
Yeah. Well, it's a very touchy subject, especially these days.
Well, it can be, but then again, I mean, it depends on who you have at your table, right? It's one of the threads that's running through my playtest campaign is like sort of an impromptu grassroots uprising of the townspeople who are banding together to try to rid their town of these drug lords. And now magic is coming into it, but it's becoming less about the cops and more about the people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I'm sure with different players, it could go a totally different way.
Right. And then, because of the strong, storytelling aspect of the game, you really need, when you're going to sit down and start, not only have that conversation about, what the players expect. And I mean, that's just, good GMing and whatever. But you need to have all the players at the table, because character creation is, a web of interconnection between all the characters and,
literally,
and that give and take. Yeah. So if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, this is standard DramaSystem stuff, and again, if you've played it, Apocalypse World or most of the PBTA games, then you're somewhat familiar with this idea. By the time Character is up, and Character is going to be involved, you sometimes devote a whole session just to character generation, and that's fine, because all of the drama and ideas that are going to, really heartstring pulling, gut wrenching, my whole fate of my future rides on this, dilemma and everything is going to come from the relationships you draw up in that initial session. So it's worth it to take your time, and as a group, you go around and create relationships between yourself and the players to your left and right. So there's, before you're even out of the gate, there's already, tension and loyalty and trust and distrust. Everybody needs something from somebody else at the table, and we're going to figure out who gets what they need by play.
Right. And that, that all goes back to the drama. Do you find, and I'm not super familiar with DramaSystem, but I know that, with the drama tokens, you can, sort of cash in, 2 or 3 and sort of force, a player from a standpoint. It's like, you get that interaction, like, I need you to, to do whatever. And then the player's like, no, I don't want to do that. And they're like, okay, well, here's 2 tokens. So I say that you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that creates tension outside of the game? I don't know if you've played, I guess you've played enough DramaSystem to be, familiar enough to write a whole game about it. It seems, as a player, and we're all very provincial about, it's what my character would do. Do you find that kind of, breaks that social contract to a certain extent?
There's a fine line there. Absolutely. Or maybe I should say there's a blurry line there. And it definitely depends on the individual people that you have sitting around the table, their personality types and their openness, their willingness to go along with stuff. I will tell you this, when you talked about like trepidation earlier, that part of the rules, which again is pretty much standard DramaSystem, Tom retained it, although he did strip it down a little bit, and I retained it as well, because there are moments where I can see it becoming mechanically necessary. That said, I almost never see the drama tokens actually pulled out and used. And it's just been my experience every time I played. People like to get them. It's like, ooh, another little shiny thing for me.
Right.
But then they almost kind of forget that they have them. And I've never seen it get antagonistic. Someone will throw a drama token if they want to be really sure this happens. And I've never seen anybody really argue with that. I've never seen it get antagonistic, although there are quite complex rules for what to do if it gets antagonistic. That part of the rules always did give me a little bit of trepidation. I mean, I know why they're there, but I'm glad that I've never had to whip them out. Now, another thing is that DramaSystem, let me say, the Melandros branch of DramaSystem does have a GM, and it's a fairly strong GM role. So it's if we've given people the impression that the GM is a completely distributed thing, well, we should back up because the powers of the GM are distributed, but there's still one primary GM. And the GM has moves, just like in Apocalypse World and a lot of PBTA games. There's a list of GM moves. And when everybody looks at you like, well, what happens next? The GM makes a GM move. And if things got to the point where two players are really at loggerheads and they can't talk it out, see, usually talking it out works. And, and kind of people forget that using their tokens against each other. I don't see that happening a lot. I see people using their token for themselves, right? But I don't see a lot of people using tokens against each other. But even if it did come down to that, there is a GM, and the GM can always say, okay, here's the way it goes.
Right. So they use it for themselves. So it's more of a, in an NPC scenario, it's like, well, I really want this guy to do this thing for me. And there's less of a, maybe less of a pushback if if it moves the story along, and then the GM's like, okay, he goes and does it.
Yeah. And I stress that even more when it comes to Magic, because when you're trying to make a magical effect happen, the last thing you want is for it to fizzle out. You've established, whatever you're praying for, shooting for, going for. You may have taken some hallucinogenic drug. You may have built an altar. You may have done prayer for 9 days. And this is, whatever it is, it's pretty important to you. And you have the capability to use the drama tokens. You also have the capability to expend poder. Poder is power, your magic power. In order to push things. And again, just like that drama tokens, it gives you an extra ability to grab the plot at that moment and turn it the way you need it to turn.
And characters who are, I forget, does every character have a certain amount of poder to start with, or is that only the magical characters?
Only the magical characters do. You can gain it, but if you're not a magical character, it's sort of rare and accidental that you gain it. My description of how it works is, it's like normal people have it, but don't know how to consciously use it. Whereas if you're trained in the magical arts, you know not only how to consciously use it, but also how to acquire more. But we've all heard stories about inexplicable feats of strength. An old lady lifts a jeep to save a baby, that kind of, and just like nobody knows how she did it, but she lifted a jeep, for Christ's sake.
Right.
But something magical happened at that moment. She somehow tapped into her magical ability.
Or the guy, who's just like super lucky, like he, always finds money on the ground, or he, wins a couple bucks on the lottery, or, whatever weird thing always happens, he's, kind of attributed to that as well.
Yeah, if you're not a magic user in the game, then even if you did gain a point of poder and spend it, and the rules do touch on this, it should be spent kind of on the meta level. That let's say you're supplicating yourself to someone in order for them to grant you a favor, and you need to make some sort of roll, and you want to be able to push it so that they do the favor for you. It should be played off on the meta level. Like at that moment, something from their deep past touches them in a way that they haven't felt for years, and they agree. Something kind of magical and inexplicable happens.
Right.
Because if you're not trained in recognizing it, it just sort of happens. So if you spend a point on the meta level, but your character is not a magician, then your character doesn't know why it happened. You as a writer, right? You as an author know why it happened. But as far as the story is concerned, hey, sometimes weird shit just happens.
Yeah. And I can see spending the drama tokens too, because some of the the magical thing. It's like, hey, you light a candle and you're in prayer and meditation for hours, or over the course of like a week or whatever. You're trying to accomplish all these different things. So there's a big time investment for the character to bring about magical actions.
Absolutely. That's when you want to, pull out all the stops, even if you end up, tiring yourself.
Hmm. It seems like a very cool system. Yeah, it hooked me right from the get go between the the realism of the story, and then it's for me the affiliation with sort of the urban fantasy and stuff. It seems like it'd be just a tremendous amount of fun to play.
Why, I certainly hope that you find that to be true. Yeah, I find that it's a lot of fun to play, and again, Tom gave me sort of carte blanche, like, I would like you to do an expansion, and I had so much fun doing the expansion that I really just wanted to make it available to people who weren't part of the Melandros Kickstarter, and that's why this new release is out. And by the way, the print edition, I've got the galley coming to me now. It would have been great to actually have it here. I could turn on my camera and show you. The physical version is not out yet. It should be out with. Where are we? What's the date today? The 4th.
The 4th. Yep.
It should be out by mid-January. But right now the PDF is available at Drive-Thru and RPG now.
Yep, and we have a link in the show notes for that as well, so people can go check that out there. Do you have any other things that you've been working on lately? That you said you've been working on this for the last year or so. Do you have any other things in the works?
Oh boy, I got so much stuff in the works. I've got a plethora of Patreon projects. I run. I don't know if you know this, but I run a site on the side called Fictioneers, fictioneers.net, and it's a directory of indie games, small press, both traditional and story games, but mostly small press and indie games. Most of them are free, and it's got a couple different rating systems. It's got a crunchiness rating system and whether the game uses a GM or not. And then a place for people to leave comments. There's not a lot of people leave comments, but right now there's something like 300 games in there. And that's what I kind of do on the side, is maintaining that. So if you might want to go out to fictioneers.net, all you game developers out there, game designers, see if your game, or if you're a GM or a player, see if your favorite game's in there. If it's not, go ahead and sign up. The account is free. I have a Patreon going for that, so I can keep the site advertising free. And so if you could help out that way, that would be great. Or if you want to help out by typing in the data on some of your favorite indie games, let's grow that database. It just takes you a minute and it costs you nothing. So that would be cool. And if you want to support Day Trippers or any of my other work, like I said at the top of the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/asif, and you can link to all my stuff from there. What about now? Can you hear me now? Are you with me?
Haha, I am
Whoa.
muted. Jesus Christ.
Yikes.
The cat is on my lap and must have sat on the little button that controls my microphone.
Okay, so does that mean I was actually on air? the whole time?
I believe you were on there because I could hear you like shuffling papers. I saw you mute and unmute, and I'm going, oh no, I have to edit things now.
You do. You have to edit things now. But I don't have to
Uh,
repeat myself. That's
I
that's
well
good,
so
right?
I don't know if you heard the last question I asked. Then was aside from your Other Borders campaign, or is there any other RPGs that you're currently playing? Any board gaming that you're doing?
Uh, oh no, actually, I haven't played in a couple months. Um, I'm writing. I'm writing. You know what? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say it because you can find it on my Patreon. The next big project from Azure Productions is right now. It's called Ubiquity, and it will be a source book for near future campaigns. The setting involves a postmodern city that's completely smart, i.e., a ubiquitous computing city. It's something that we all have. We hear about the future is going to be smart cities and ubiquitous computing, and everything's going to be live in the cloud. We're going to have AIs and robots, and what's that going to be like? Well, that's what I intend to answer. So
You get
I'm
Skynet.
doing a lot of that's how we get Skynet. Do you want Skynet? Because that's how we get Skynet. I know. I'm trying to present a positive spin on it, though.
Well, that sounds interesting.
Skynet is your friend.
Right. Until it's not.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of research, and this is partly for Day Trippers, because Day Trippers, of course, takes place 100 years in the future. But also, as I've been working on it, it's grown into both a source book and an anthology of short stories. So I'm collaborating with some other people on that, and it's turned into a much larger project.
Ah, cool. That's never a bad. Well, as you say, it's never a bad thing, but I guess it could be a, I guess it could be a headache to coordinate everything.
It's definitely a hat that I've never worn before.
Hmm.
But one of my really my only resolution for 2017 is to start publishing work by other people. So that's one of my goals. Is from when I talk to you a year from now,
Yep.
the As If Productions publishing imprint will have some other authors under its belt. That's my resolution.
Cool. That's a very cool goal for the new year. Um, let's see. Guess I don't really have anything else. The way this day ended really kind of threw me for a loop.
I'm sorry, and then your cat mutes your microphone, right?
Well, he is kind of a dick. I think we've probably established that over the course of 85 episodes.
Isn't Mercury retrograde? I think Mercury is retrograde right now. That's what it is.
It could be. It could be. We do have to lead us out here our final 5 questions, and now
Oh,
you've gone through the first batch, so I've got a second batch here. We can run you through these.
oh,
And,
talk about trepidation.
yeah. All right. The first one is book or Kindle.
Book,
Always, right?
sure,
Yeah, yeah.
for
It's
so
not
many reasons.
the physical, to hold it, to smell it, to be able to pull it off the shelf and like flip through it and not have to turn a device on, and yeah.
Dog ear it, highlight it, make memories based on it.
Oh no, you can't highlight it and dog ear it. You lost me.
Yeah, I'm a bit of an extremist. I formed such a personal relationship with my books. It's like my own body. I have the right to tattoo it.
Someone at Imperial Scum, Danny on Twitter, she had posted up a picture of her, I think it was her GM's guide or player's handbook, all highlighted in different colors. I was like, oh no.
Exactly it. I highlight according to a color scheme. My DMG actually has little paper tabs. Okay, I take tabs on all the different sections.
Hmm.
This is a highly modified book here. The user interface design has been modded, is what I'm saying.
Can't do that with a PDF.
Can't do that with a PDF, man.
All right. Board games or RPGs?
RPGs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I've been super into board games lately, but yeah.
That's a tough choice. I see them as like completely different kinds of experiences.
Mhm,
But I'm a kind of a cerebral person. I'm a theater of the mind guy.
mhm. Yeah, for me, I like the quicker like filler game type stuff. So something that plays in 15 minutes or a half an hour, as opposed to epic. We're gonna play this board game for 7 hours because at that point, like I'd rather play D&D.
Well, yeah, and I think as a compromise, and not just me, but a lot of designers, I would say a huge trend, even among traditional designers, and obviously among narrativist designers, has been more and more people designing a good one-shot, a game that runs really nicely in 4 hours, and then even if you never play it again, you can be happy with what happened.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And it's a good way to get a feel for a system too. You grab something, you play for 4 hours, or you get an opportunity to play something at a convention. It kind of gives you a feel for how that system's going to run, and whether it's something you think you'd enjoy or your players would enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Day Trippers, for instance, is written to be episodic and literally follow the curve of a TV show.
Mhm.
A 1 hour long episode with 4 quarters in it.
Right, right.
Give you that narrative arc and that resolution,
Hmm.
so that you can go home feeling like, even if you haven't finished a campaign, you're going to string these together, but feeling like something has resolved.
Right. You get that sense of accomplishment when you go
Yeah,
home. Yep. All right. Doctor Who or Firefly?
Firefly.
Okay. Even with only one season?
I, you know, I, I may get some flack for this, but I've never been really big on Doctor Who. Firefly, on the other hand, as I've intimated earlier in the podcast, that sort of ensemble drama hits me where I live.
Hmm. Okay. This one's probably a no-brainer, and I probably need to come up with another question. But hack and slash or role play?
Well, for sure, it's role play. Hack and slash is
Yeah.
good when you're drunk. So, give the devil his due. Um, but again, theater of the mind stuff, and not that I wouldn't play any other. I play all kinds of games. I mean, I've written for Iron Crown. Okay, like the crunchiest of the crunch.
Hmm.
So I got no problem with different systems for different purposes, different play groups, different styles. I want to play them all, but the games that I personally that stick in my head the most, that I feel most proud of or most happy that I participated in, is really deep, immersive role play with a lot of bleed, a lot of emotion.
Okay. This isn't one of the questions, but to follow up with that, do you find that you GM more, or do you end up playing more?
Oh, I GM, 90% of the time, probably
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
Okay. Is that just for lack of someone who wants to run a game, or do you just feel more
There's
comfortable?
there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I've been a professional game designer since '88 when I sold my first adventure module in '88 to Iron Crown. So uh, at the time, I had a regular group of friends, and the GM duties would sort of rotate. Although even back then, I did GM more often, but at least I played like at least a quarter of the time I was a player. And as soon as I got published, that changed. Part of it was that I was more interested in working, running, play testing, getting the next product out.
Sure.
Part of it is, I think, honestly, a lot of people have imposter syndrome. I'm here to tell you, don't have imposter syndrome, because I was just a fan of Iron Crown, and I wrote a fan letter to Terry Amthor, and I said, "Hey, would you like to see some of my shit?" And he said, "Yeah." I didn't say it like that, but really, I mean, the difference between, especially these days, desktop publishing, PDF publishing, the difference between a professional game designer and just a GM who wrote something, there's really no difference. It's a blurry line. So go
Hmm.
ahead and jump across that line, because we all started somewhere.
Right. And Wizards is with the release of fifth edition is kind of extended a hand in that regard with the was it the Dungeon Masters Guild, where you can post up and sell all different kinds of things through the site now. I think that's what it's called. I can't remember.
Well, again, more democracy.
Yeah. So I mean, that's fantastic, because it just sort of opens it up, because I think at least most of the people that I played with have all, for the most part, have run some sort of a sandbox campaign, or even if they had a module, it was loosely based on that module. So there's a super creative group out there that have been playing for 30, 40 years. So it's nice to be able to see them acknowledged, and kind of that olive branch, at least from the D&D aspect.
Absolutely. And again, I think that imposter syndrome is a terrible thing, and you should just go ahead and get over it. But that's really where the line is drawn, in my experience. Everybody can cross that line, but once you do, you may find that you're invited to play in other people's campaigns a lot less, although you'll probably be asked to GM a lot more.
Right.
So that's going to happen to you as you become closer and closer to quote unquote professional, whatever that means.
Right. Well, and it's the same thing with Kickstarter too, as well. That line between, board game designer with, air quotes, not air quotes, I think people design, whatever, but, between the professional designer and, hey, I made a game and I play tested it, and my friends like it, and I've taken it to my local game store, and I can be on Kickstarter now, and I can have this thing made and get it out in the wild.
Yeah, and I can get depressed by my miserable sales and all the things that happen to professionals.
Yeah. Right. All right. And our last question here is, if you could be one supernatural creature, what would it be?
Ooh. Wow. A Rakshasa.
Ooh.
Because they're just so cool.
They are very cool.
I had a character in my AD&D campaign who, through some bizarre confluence of the dice and the gods, became a Rakshasa.
Really?
And I let him do it, because I'm that kind of GM. Fascinating stuff. Yeah, that's what I would want to be.
That's cool. How did that play out in game?
Well, let's just throw the word balance right out the window.
Yeah.
I ran a campaign that as soon as I guess I want to blame Chaosium for the Thieves' World books in the City of Sanctuary, because as soon as that worked its way into my campaign, which I loved and got so much use out of it, that's still the greatest city supplement ever made. But it also brought this element of the gods being like right in your face, directly involved in the affairs of humans. And of course, my players read all those books as soon as they came out, just as I did. And so they all wanted to participate on that level. And I had one player who was an avatar of a god, and he was best friends with the Hellhound Tempest. And yeah, I mean, they all had to get in. So it became a really, really super high powered, deity driven campaign real fast.
Right. Well, and that's a different, I mean, it's a different game than, hey, you guys all meet at the inn and,
Oh, yeah.
go out and, do your thing. No, that sounds like it would be an interesting game. Hard to balance, I suppose.
You don't even try to balance anymore. But in a way, I think that's where, again, because a lot of, even back then in those days, even playing AD&D, the most memorable sessions were like basically improv, role play, the psychological stuff that we would come up with and pull on each other. This stuff went both ways, because as a GM, I like nothing better than when my players completely surprise me.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to do some quick thinking to figure out how to even incorporate this. I love that. And it goes both ways. And so you end up, you and your friends, in a completely imaginary conceptual territory, saying stuff that makes you feel things that are like superhuman. Oh man,
Mm-hmm.
I can't even finish that sentence.
Yeah, yeah. It's very cool. I mean, I used to listen to a ton of podcasts, and I've really kind of limited what I'm listening to these days. But there's still, and some of them are just funny, and some of it's just jackassery at the table. And then some games you listen to, and it just, whatever it is, it just grabs you.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool thing to be a part of that, even just as a listener, not someone at the table, to be able to sort of experience all the things that the people at the table are experiencing, because you're experiencing, I guess, on a somewhat different level because you're not involved, but to be sort of in tune with what's going on with the characters and the flow of the game it's a really cool byproduct of the hobby, I think.
Yeah, and as a GM, I'd say, at least in my style of GMing, it's not that I'm not involved. It's true that I can shift from one NPC to another, but these really powerful, emotional, dramatic scenes that happen, although they do often happen player to player, they also often happen, at least for me, player to NPC, and my players would form deep and complex relations with their NPCs. And so, in a way, the GM gets that immersive feeling of being that other person.
Mm-hmm.
Because while you're acting out this scene, you're not going to jump out of Capanvera's head and into somebody else's head. You're going to play Capanvera for this scene, and the brotherhood, the kinship, the risk of betrayal. All of these are just as real as the player is feeling it. Mm-hmm. while that's going on. Again, the most effective games for me have always been really bleedy, and so I'm always aiming for that. Day Trippers has actually rules for trying to elicit psychically charged content from the player, stuff that they actually have an emotional connection to or a true feeling about, in order to sort of dress it up and introduce it back at them, mirror it back at them, and that creates a little bubble reality of its own, right? The whole rest of the world falls away because what's happening is capital M meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when players are fully engaged like that, and they are, in touch with other NPCs and things like that, it gives you a way. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but it gives you a way to then manipulate them.
You're inside their head for sure. The grand illusion of the player is that I have carte blanche to act however I wish because it's not me, it's my PC. But the psychological truth that the GM knows is that nothing comes out of your head that isn't you, okay? Mm-hmm. So you are acting out in this way with this flavor, this role, this class, this set of skills or whatever, but you're still the one that chose it. You're still the one who generated out of all the things you could have been or could have said or could have done at this moment in the game, this is what you chose to do. So you are, in fact, displaying yourself very deeply. And I've long said that if we lived in a sane world, a GM should have a therapist's license.
Right.
Because you really should have some conscientiousness, respect, and the best of intentions, with no willingness to do any harm that no one would want. Like, some people want to be scared, right? And some people want to have their buttons pushed, and some people want to act out vicariously. That's like hack and slash is all about. But make sure that's where they want to go, and then if that's where they want to go there with them, help them go there, because everybody, no matter what their favorite depth is, everybody wants the deepest thing they can imagine.
Right.
I think that there is definitely something psychotherapeutic in not only in role playing in general, but also in the techniques available to a good GM who is conscientious and has the player's real psychology in mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it is very cathartic to play. Like, even if it's just a hack and slash game, if you're, I work in a lab, so it's very tedious. It's, very boring every day doing the same thing over and over. But, for 4 hours, I can slay dragons and be the center of attention, or, whatever I need to get out of it for that evening. I can do that. And then, just the inherent camaraderie of, being at the table, or, now with, Google Hangouts and Roll20 and all these different things, you can hang out with people from all over the place. So I'm in Arizona, you're in Las Vegas right now, and you could just as easily be sitting here. Like, it's just an easy conversation, and without even any video tonight.
Sure, and that's one of the great things about this hobby is that, like, I mean, at the greatest, you gain all that deep psychic stuff that I was talking about earlier. But at the very least, you get catharsis and a little social interaction. You get a little kick of dopamine going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. At the very least, you get that.
Yep, for sure.
That's a good investment.
Absolutely. And one I think we all need more than we're willing to admit.
Right?
Absolutely. All right, that's all I have. It was a pleasure to have you on again and get a chance to just, talk and BS and find out about your new project and help to get the, spread the word out there so people come and check that out and, kind of find out, what's kind of games that they like and whether or not other borders is something that, people would like to get into and give it a shot.
I thank you for the opportunity. It's always great talking to you. And I love your radio voice. People tell you that? You got a great radio voice.
I have never heard that because I hate it myself.
No, I think you got a good radio voice. For
well,
sure.
Thank you. I appreciate
it's enjoyable. That. It's enjoyable being on the other end of this radio voice. So
well,
I thank you. Yeah.
Yep, no, absolutely. I wish other people would come and say that, or the fact that they hated it. If we could, like you said, people are reticent to come and leave comments. So, we kind of operate in a vacuum to a certain extent.
I think you're doing a great job. Did I answer all 5 questions? Was that 5?
Yes. Yeah. The creature thing was the last one.
All right.
Awesome. Well, everybody go, if you want to give out all the details again.
Yeah, thanks very much. Everybody can, you can go to asifproductions.com, and whatever I've been, posting about lately will always be up there. But currently from there, you can get to patreon.com/asif, and all my projects are up there. If I do anything that you find enjoyable or interesting or would like to see more of, then please throw money at me, because I don't do Kickstarters. I don't like holding my work for ransom, but that doesn't mean I don't need your help. So come on, check it out. That's all I got.
All right, we'll have links to everything in the show notes, so everybody can go ahead and check that out. That would be fantastic. If you appreciate Todd's work, then absolutely go over and check the Patreon and, leave a couple of bucks there. I have a couple of Patreons that I support myself, so it helps out artists, authors, game designers, musicians, all that stuff. They're out there doing good, and for everybody that enjoys all of those different things, it's it's a very cool way to in a very real sense support projects that you do like, and that's a fantastic thing.
Directly, and to interact with the artists. And if there's anyone in the world who doesn't know what Patreon is, to go to Patreon.
Yep, absolutely. I'll give out all of our stuff here. So you can find this awesome interview and all of our other cool stuff at legendsoftabletop.com. If you have any questions, comments, or that super critical feedback, you can reach us at legendsoftabletop@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at legends_of_tabletop. We're on Twitter at legendstabletop. We have a Tumblr that's connected to the page and a Google Plus page. We're on iTunes and SoundCloud and Player FM and all those cool things. So you can find us all over. Just stick us into Google and you'll find something cool, I'm sure. We appreciate everybody checking this out, and we'll catch you next time.